what's really going on with the cash in your wallet? Or, maybe the better question is, what's happening with the digital stuff that isn't even physical anymore?
Yeah.
It feels like money itself, how we use it, is just changing so fast.
Absolutely. It's a really fascinating time. We're seeing these shifts, from the tiniest coin on the penny all the way up to, well, big questions about digital dollars and the whole system.
Well, today on the Deep Dive, we're really focusing in on the future of U.S. currency.
Hmm.
We've gathered a lot of material. Here's a proper deep dive looking at everything from that humble penny, which it turns out costs a lot more than a penny to make,
Right.
all the way to the, well, let's call it the evolving landscape of digital money.
And for you listening, if you've ever, wondered why you still get pennies, even though they seem kind of useless, or if you're trying to figure out all this buzz about digital currency, then yeah, this deep dive is exactly for you. We're aiming to pull out the key insights, the sort of aha moments from these economic reports, government documents, policy updates.
Right.
So you can quickly get a handle on what's actually happening and why it matters for, how you buy your coffee or pay your bills.
Our mission today is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Just get to the heart of it. We want to understand the economic forces, the technology, what's reshaping U.S. currency, and what does it actually mean for us day to day?
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting small. The penny. It feels like we've been talking about ditching it forever. And it sounds like it's finally happening. Production stopping, early 2026?
That's the plan, yeah. The debate's been rumbling for ages, and the core issue, well, it's simple, really. For nearly 20 years now, it's cost more to physically make a penny than 1 cent.
Seriously, how much more are we talking? Is it like 1.1 cents or?
Oh, much more.
Yeah.
In 2024, the estimate was around 3.7 cents to make 1 penny.
3.7 cents for a 1 cent coin.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, multiply that by the billions the U.S. Mint makes, the losses stack up fast. We're talking somewhere like $85 million lost in fiscal year 2024.
That's just, it's wild. 85 million loss making pennies. What makes them so expensive? Is it the copper?
It's mainly the raw materials, especially zinc, actually. That's the biggest chunk of a modern penny. And the price of zinc, well, it goes up and down, but it's been high enough to push the cost way over face value.
Huh, zinc.
Yeah. And, back in 2014, the Mint looked into it, and they basically said, look, at that time, there wasn't a cheaper metal mix that worked. And like you said, Treasury just put in the final order for penny blanks. It really just highlights how inefficient it is. Imagine running a factory where you lose money on every single item you produce.
It sounds completely absurd when you put it like that. And I guess it's not just the money, right? There are other costs.
Exactly. There's an environmental cost, too. Mining the zinc, the copper, transporting it, minting the coins. It all uses energy, causes some pollution, and we're doing this for billions of coins that, frankly, a lot of people just stash away.
Which brings us to this penny paradox thing you mentioned. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, the penny paradox. It's this weird situation where there are like 240 billion pennies technically in circulation.
Okay.
But a huge number of them aren't really circulating at all. They're in jars, lost down the back of sofas, maybe just thrown out. They're not really part of the active money supply.
I am definitely guilty of the penny jar. I keep meaning to cash them in, but,
You and millions of others. There's an estimate that Americans just discard or lose something like $68 million in change every year. A lot of that has got to be pennies.
68 million just lost.
Yeah. So to replace all those lost and hoarded pennies, the Mint has to crank out billions of new ones every year, like 3.2 billion in 2024. That was over half more than 57% of all the coins they minted that year.
Just to replace the ones sitting in jars or lost in parking lots.
Pretty much. So we're spending, 3.7 cents each to make billions of replacements for coins that aren't doing their job. It's like pouring water into a leaky bucket, isn't it?
It sounds incredibly wasteful. So, okay, the arguments for finally pulling the plug, what are the main ones?
Yeah.
Beyond just stopping the losses.
Well, the direct cost saving is the big, obvious one. Stop making them. You immediately save, $56 million a year, potentially $250 million over 10 years. Even former President Trump pointed to the penny as wasteful spending.
Right.
Then there's just the fact that a penny buys almost nothing anymore. Its purchasing power has tanked down over 97% since 1900.
Wow.
Like the economist Greg Mankiw said, it just doesn't really fulfill its main purpose anymore. And think about your time. A former Mint director, Philip Dial, made the point that for most people, the time it takes to bend down and pick up a dropped penny, it's worth more than the penny itself.
Yeah, I definitely don't bother picking them up anymore. It feels pointless.
Exactly. It's become a bit of a nuisance. And, look overseas. Canada stopped making them in 2012. Australia, New Zealand, way back in the 90s.
And how did that go? Did prices shoot up with rounding?
Not really, no. They brought in rounding rules for cash, usually to the nearest 5 cents, and the sky didn't fall. There wasn't some huge negative economic impact. Actually, in New Zealand, there was even some suggestion prices might have slightly decreased.
Interesting.
Plus, think of the time saved at the checkout, fumbling for exact change. One study estimated that saving just a couple of seconds per cash transaction could add up to hundreds of millions of dollars in time value annually. The Convenience Store Association figured it saves over 1,200 days of cashier time a year just by shaving off 2 seconds per transaction.
That's a lot of time.
It adds up. And let's be honest, a lot of shops already price things like $9.99 specifically to avoid dealing with pennies anyway.
True. Okay, so the case seems strong.
Mm-hmm.
But there must be arguments against it, right? Why the long debate?
Oh, definitely. The biggest concern you hear is about that rounding, the so-called rounding tax.
Right, the worry that shops will always round up.
Exactly. The fear is that businesses will round up to the nearest nickel more often than down, and that this will hit consumers, especially people who use cash more often. Groups like Americans for Common Sense have argued it could cost people hundreds of millions a year.
But does the evidence actually support that from those other countries?
Well, the studies are a bit mixed, but several analyses, especially looking at what happens after sales tax is added, suggest the effect is pretty neutral overall when you round to the nearest 5 cents. Some data, like we said about New Zealand, even hinted at a tiny deflationary effect. The real-world experience doesn't point to massive price gouging.
Okay.
What else? Another point is, if we stop making pennies, won't we just need more nickels?
Good point. And you said nickels are also expensive.
We'll get to that, but yes, spoiler alert, nickels are an even bigger money loser per coin right now. So some argue getting rid of the penny just shifts the problem, potentially making the nickel situation worse.
Right. It's all connected.
Totally. You can't really fix one without thinking about the other. Then there's the charity angle.
Mm-hmm.
Penny drives.
Yeah, schools do those.
They do, but, even charities are moving more towards digital donations now. It's often more efficient. And finally, there's just nostalgia, sentiment, the Lincoln penny. It's been around forever.
That feel like a part of Americana, I suppose.
It does, but polls show that when people learn how much they actually cost to make and how little they're used, that support tends to drop off. Public opinion can change, especially with information campaigns like Canada ran.
So what's the actual path forward then? We know production stops early 2026.
Right, that's the administrative decision. But to make it permanent, to stop accepting them as legal tender eventually, and to set up those national rounding rules for cash transactions, that likely needs an act of Congress.
Okay. Are they working on that?
There were bills introduced in 2025 aiming to do just that, so yeah, it's on the agenda. A big piece will be public education, explaining how rounding works, reassuring people. Canada did a good job with that.
And the existing pennies, billions of them.
They'll still be legal tender. People can spend them, deposit them at banks. They'll just gradually disappear from circulation over time. No sudden panic.
Okay, so the penny's fate seems pretty much sealed.
Yeah.
But you dropped that hint about the nickel being even more expensive.
Yeah, the nickel situation is kind of mind-blowing, actually. In 2024, the cost to make a 5-cent nickel was estimated at about 13.8 cents.
Wait, nearly 14 cents to make 5 cents?
Yeah, a loss of almost 9 cents on every single nickel. And the total loss for the mint on nickels in fiscal 24, around $17.7 million. And this isn't new. They've lost money on nickels for 19 years straight.
19 years. That's worse than the penny in terms of loss per coin.
Significantly worse per coin. And that leads right back to the earlier point. If you eliminate the penny, demand for nickels will likely go up, right? It becomes the smallest coin.
Makes sense.
So if we keep making nickels out of the current expensive metal mix, the mint's losses could actually increase, maybe even wipe out the savings from stopping penny production.
Yeah.
In fact, in 2023, because they minted so many nickels, the total dollar loss on nickels actually exceeded the loss on pennies. It just doesn't make sense to phase out the penny while keeping an even less economical coin going with the same old materials.
So what's the fix for the nickel? Can they change the metals like they couldn't for the penny back then?
That's the hope. The Treasury Secretary seems optimistic they can get the cost down by changing the composition, and the Mint has been researching new alloys, mandated by a law, back in 2010.
Okay, what have they found?
There's one option that seems pretty ready to go. It's an 80-20 copper-nickel mix, mostly copper, some nickel, a bit of manganese.
Copper nickel, isn't that what dimes and quarters use now?
Similar, yeah. Testing's done. They say it's seamless, looks right, works in vending machines, basically indistinguishable for practical purposes.
Wow.
If Congress gives the okay, they could implement it in about a year and save maybe $12 million annually across nickels, dimes, and quarters.
That sounds promising.
Yeah.
Relatively quick, saves money. Any other options?
There's another alloy they're developing, C99 something something. It's got more manganese in it.
Okay.
That one could potentially save even more, maybe $24 million a year. But it's still being developed. There are potential issues with manufacturing it consistently, getting the color just right. Full production wouldn't be possible before 2027 at the earliest.
So a potentially bigger payoff, but further down the road and less certain.
Exactly. But the main point is, something has to change with the nickel's composition if we want real cost savings in our coinage.
It really does sound like metallurgy is key here.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting from coins to paper, or maybe back to coins. The dollar bill versus the dollar coin. That debate feels almost as old as the penny one.
It pops up again and again, yeah.
Yeah.
And economically, the argument for the coin is pretty strong. Coins last way longer, like 30 years plus, compared to maybe 6 or 7 years for a paper dollar bill.
6 years. That's not long at all. Nope. They wear out fast. Coins are also cheaper to handle in bulk for banks and businesses and harder to counterfeit.
Mm-hmm.
The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, has put out report after report showing potential savings of billions over time if we switched. Maybe $184 million a year.
So, why are we still using dollar bills almost exclusively? I almost never see dollar coins.
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? We've tried introducing them. Remember the Susan B. Anthony dollar? The Sacagawea dollar?
Vaguely. They never seem to catch on.
Exactly. And the main reason seems crystal clear. The government never took the dollar bill out of circulation at the same time.
Yeah.
People just stuck with what they knew, the paper.
So unlike Canada or Australia, who got rid of their equivalent paper money.
Precisely. They made a clean break. The GAO even recommended that the U.S. must eliminate the $1 bill for a dollar coin to actually succeed. It just shows you can't underestimate habit. Policy needs to be decisive, not just offer an alternative. Half measures don't seem to work with something this fundamental. Fascinating. Okay, what about the $2 bill? That always feels like finding a four-leaf clover.
Yeah, the $2 bill is definitely an oddity. Very few are actually circulating, about $3.2 billion worth out there, end of 2023, compared to like $14.5 billion in one bills.
But are they expensive to make, like the penny or nickel?
No, surprisingly cheap. Costs the same as a $1 bill, about 3.2 cents. They actually brought it back in 1976 after discontinuing it earlier because nobody used it.
Nobody really uses it now either.
Pretty much. It never gained traction. People tend to hoard them because they seem rare or special.
A novelty trap.
Exactly. Its rarity prevents it from being useful. You might see them used in some niche ways, like tourist spots, giving them as change, or maybe alumni groups, but not for everyday buying and selling. It's questionable if it really serves a purpose as circulating currency.
More like a collectible that's technically money.
Kind of, yeah. And then you have the $half coin. When is the last time you actually used one or received one?
Honestly, maybe never in a regular transaction. Maybe in a collection as a kid.
Right. They're actually profitable. For the mint cost about 34 cents to make a 50-cent piece in 2024. But they just don't circulate. The Fed orders some, but mostly for collector sets, not really for general use.
So why keep making them for circulation at all?
That's the argument some coin experts and economists make. Maybe just produce them for the collector market where there's demand and start minting them for general circulation where they barely exist. It raises that question again. Is the mint's job just efficiency and maybe turning a profit on coins like the $half, or is it supplying denominations people actually use?
It feels like we've got a few bits of currency that are just out of sync with how we actually use money today.
I think that's fair to say. It highlights that need for a strategic look at the whole system. It's always this balancing act, isn't it? Cost savings versus what people are used to versus what's actually useful.
Yeah.
The Mint's research into new metals is part of that, trying to cut costs without causing chaos with vending machines or making coins look weird. They've got those potential new alloys.
The cupronickel and the manganese one?
Right, and there's even been talk of giving the Treasury Secretary more power to change coin metals based on cost criteria, making the whole system more adaptable. But again, the dollar coin failure is a big lesson. Economics isn't enough. You have to account for public habit and have clear, decisive policies.
Okay, so that's the physical side, pennies going, nickels needing new metal, dollar coins struggling. But the really huge shifts are digital, right?
Yeah.
How are we actually paying for things now?
Oh, the digital transformation is massive and accelerating. Think about all the ways. ACH bank transfers, credit and debit cards, obviously, but then mobile wallets like Apple Pay or Google Pay, peer-to-peer apps like Venmo or Zelle, instant payment services. It's exploded.
It really has. My phone feels like my wallet most days.
You're not alone. Digital wallet usage surged something like 32% in 2023 alone. That's huge compared to, say, bank app usage growth.
32%. Wow.
Yeah. And for sending money to friends, P2P payments, mobile and digital wallets are totally dominant now, over 70%. Online shopping, same story. Digital wallets lead, nearly 37% share.
Okay, so online and P2P, it's digital first. What about paying in actual stores?
That's growing too, using phones at the register, but maybe a bit slower. Somewhere around 17-20% adoption for in-store mobile payments. The U.S. actually lags some other countries there, but businesses, they're definitely pushing towards accepting more digital payments, better cash flow. Customers expect it.
And where does that leave cash? Is it disappearing?
It's definitely declining. In 2024, cash was only used for about 16% of all transactions. That's down from 20% just back in 2021. So yeah, fewer than 1 in 5 payments are cash now.
16%. That feels low.
It is historically low, but, and this is important, cash is still king for small purchases. Almost half of all transactions under $10 are still cash.
Oh, okay. Coffee money.
Exactly. And it's absolutely vital for lower income folks that use cash for over half their transactions. Plus, you see a generational gap.
Yeah.
Younger people, Gen Z, millennials, they heavily favor contactless digital payments. And another trend, more businesses are going cashless. Only about 60% accepted cash in 2024. The pandemic definitely sped all this up too. Coin shortages, hygiene concerns. It pushed people towards digital faster.
So we get this cash paradox you mentioned.
Exactly. Big picture shift to digital, but cash is still crucial for certain people and certain uses. The risk is creating a two-tiered system. If cash becomes harder and harder to use, access becomes an issue.
That's a really important point about equity. Now, speaking of digital, the big buzzword for a while was CBDC, central bank digital currency, a digital dollar from the Fed. That's the latest there. Feels like the conversation shifted.
It shifted dramatically. Before 2025, the Fed was definitely exploring it. They put out a discussion paper, looked at principles like privacy, using banks as intermediaries, making it widely usable.
Yeah.
But they always stress, we need backing from the White House and Congress to actually do this. There were research projects running, like Project Hamilton with MIT, Project Cedar in New York.
Right, testing the tech.
Yeah. And the Biden administration had put out an executive order urging research, calling it high priority.
Oh, then?
Then came January 2025. A new executive order from the Trump administration explicitly prohibiting the federal government from creating a CBDC. Full stop.
Prohibiting, not just pausing research.
Prohibiting.
Yeah.
It ordered ongoing work to be terminated, revoked the earlier EO. The reasons cited were concerns about financial stability risks, privacy, government overreach, sovereignty. Basically a range of potential downsides.
Okay, that's a major reversal.
Huge. And Fed Chair Powell came out afterwards and said, look, no CBDC while I'm here. We're not working on anything designed to lead to one. There's even a no CBDC act proposed in Congress to make the ban law.
So dead in the water for now, it seems.
For the time being, yes. All those potential benefits people talked about before, financial inclusion, faster payments, innovation, fighting counterfeiting, a more resilient system.
Yeah.
Those arguments are now overshadowed by the perceived risks, particularly privacy, the fear of government surveillance, but also worries about digital bank runs, cybersecurity, the impact on banks and monetary policy, and just the sheer cost of building it.
So the debate went from technical and economic to more political and ideological.
Very much so. And it puts the U.S. on a different path from many other major economies that are still exploring or even piloting CBDCs. The focus here now seems to be on letting the private sector innovate, particularly with things like stablecoins.
Stablecoins, right. Like digital dollars backed by real dollars, but issued by private companies.
Exactly. And that ties into the regulatory side. If the government isn't issuing a digital dollar, how do we regulate the private ones?
Good question. It feels like the rules are still catching up.
They are. Historically, it's been a bit fragmented. SEC, CFTC, FinCEN, all looking at different pieces. That recent executive order, the one banning the CBDC, also pushed for more clarity and a, quote, favorable environment for dollar-backed stablecoin, calling for clear rules, who's in charge of what, technology-neutral regulations, trying to move away from just reacting with enforcement actions towards building a clearer framework. State regulations are also all over the map, adding another layer of complexity.
And what about open banking? I hear that term a lot. How does that fit in?
Open banking is another really big piece of this digital shift. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, finalized rules recently, Rule 10033 it's called.
Okay, what does it do?
Essentially, it gives you more control over your own financial data. It requires banks and financial institutions to set up secure ways, usually APIs, these tech connections, for you to share your transaction data or account info with other apps or services you authorize.
So I can connect my budgeting app directly to my bank account securely.
That's the idea. But you have to give consent, they have to tell you how they'll use the data, and there are limits on what they can do with it. Security, accuracy are key. Now, like any regulation, it could face challenges or reviews.
Yeah.
But the basic idea, the market demand for easily connecting different financial services, that's probably here to stay. It could really boost competition, transparency, maybe lead to cooler, more personalized financial tools.
It sounds like everything's becoming more connected, more data-driven.
Definitely. Which, of course, brings privacy and security right back to the forefront.
Always.
If everything's connected, the risks of data breaches, fraud, misuse of data, they get bigger too. That was a major concern with CBDCs, and it's crucial for open banking as well. The new rules have security requirements built in. It's that constant tension. How do you enable innovation but also protect people?
Right. The balancing act again.
Yeah. So the current direction in the U.S. seems clear. Step back from a government digital dollar, encourage private stablecoins within a clearer regulatory framework, and empower consumers with more control over their data via open banking. It's shaping up to be this kind of hybrid system, less cash, more private digital dollars, all increasingly connected. And that brings a whole new set of challenges for regulators about making sure it all works together safely and fairly.
Well, this has been incredibly illuminating. A real journey from the penny in your pocket to the, the potential future of digital finance.
It's a lot to cover.
It really is. So just to sort of wrap up the key takeaways, it feels like the U.S. currency system is definitely in flux. Physical coins like the penny are on their way out due to inefficiency. The nickel's future really depends on material science finding a cheaper recipe. The dollar coin dream seems stalled by habit.
Right, and the digital side is just racing ahead, driven by technology and consumer demand. But the idea of a government digital dollar, a CBDC, is off the table for now. The focus has shifted to regulating private digital money, like stablecoins, and opening up data access.
So for you listening, as you can probably tell, the money you use, whether it's coins, bills, or just numbers on a screen, it's all part of this much bigger story. Economic shifts, technological leaps. The decisions being made right now will really shape how we all handle money down the road.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? With tech moving so fast, what other forms might money take in, say, 10, 20 years? Things we haven't even thought of yet. And how will that impact our lives, the economy? Will this focus on private digital money really work for everyone? Address those inclusion issues we talked about? Lots of questions still to think about as this all unfolds.
Definitely food for thought. We've really only scratched the surface here today, of course. There are tons of reports and ongoing debates about every single piece of this if you want to dive even deeper.
There certainly are.
But for now, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the future of U.S. currency.